Nobody in the restaurant expected what happened next. The air seemed to crackle with tension as the waitress stood her ground, her voice echoing just loud enough to turn heads. Across from her, JD Vance, Vice President of the United States, remained seated, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. What he said next would leave everyone in the room speechless. The soft hum of conversation and the faint clinking of silverware filled the upscale bistro in downtown Washington, D.C. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city streets, where the glow of streetlights reflected off the rain-slicked pavement. Inside, leather booths and polished mahogany tables gave the restaurant an air of quiet sophistication. At a corner table near the window, JD Vance sat alone, his presence largely unnoticed by the other patrons. He carried the aura of a man accustomed to both power and scrutiny. Yet tonight he seemed more like any other diner, just another man seeking a moment of solitude after a long day. The menu rested unopened beside his glass of water. He glanced at his watch, then toward the entrance as if expecting someone. The faint hum of conversation around him continued uninterrupted, until the sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. A waitress stopped beside his table, pen and notepad in hand. Her uniform was crisp, her smile practiced, but her eyes burned with something colder. "Good evening, sir. Are you ready to order?" JD offered a polite smile. "I'll start with a coffee, please. Black, and I'll need a few more minutes to decide on the rest." The waitress's smile vanished instantly. She tapped her pen against the notepad once, twice. "Actually," she said, her tone sharp, "I don't think I can serve you." JD's brow furrowed slightly. "Pardon?" "I know who you are," she continued, her voice rising just enough to turn the heads of nearby diners. "You're JD Vance, the Vice President, and I don't serve people like you." JD's posture remained composed, but a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. "And what kind of people is that?" The waitress's lips twisted into a sneer. "People who sit in their fancy offices making decisions that screw over everyone else. People who act like they care about this country while stepping on the backs of the working class to get ahead. People like you make my life harder every single day. So no, I'm not bringing you coffee, and I don't think you belong here." Silence fell like a curtain over the nearby tables. Conversations faded as eyes discreetly turned toward the corner table. JD met her gaze steadily. "I understand we may not agree on everything," he said calmly, "but I came here tonight as a customer, just like anyone else." "Oh, please," she scoffed, taking a step closer. "You think you're just like everyone else? Sitting here in your $1,000 suit while people like me have to work double shifts just to afford rent. People like you don't know what it's like to struggle. You sit there passing laws that hurt people like my family, and now you want me to smile and pour your coffee?" Her voice carried across the room now, drawing stares from more distant tables. The low murmur of conversations had fallen to near silence. JD took a slow breath, his gaze steady. "I respect your passion," he replied, his voice measured, "but refusing to serve someone because of their beliefs, doesn't that go against the very values you're defending?" The waitress's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't twist my word," she shot back. "This isn't about beliefs. It's about the damage people like you cause. My brother lost his job last year because of government cutbacks. My mom works 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. And you sit there making speeches about personal responsibility like it's supposed to fix everything. Newsflash, Mr. Vance, it doesn't." JD's gaze never wavered. The air around them seemed to tighten as the tension between their words filled the space like static electricity. "I don't expect everyone to agree with me," JD said, "but I do believe that treating each other with respect, even when we disagree, matters." "Respect?" The waitress let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "Don't talk to me about respect. People like you look down on people like me every day of the week. You wouldn't last a week living my life. So why should I respect someone who doesn't respect what people like me go through?" A murmur of mixed reactions rippled through the nearby tables, some awkward, some intrigued. The tension in the room had shifted from curiosity to something heavier, charged with the weight of unsaid thoughts. Before JD could respond, the restaurant manager approached, his expression tight with concern. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between JD and the waitress. I was just explaining that I don't feel comfortable serving this customer, the waitress replied, her voice firm. The manager's eyes flicked toward JD, recognition dawning in his gaze. His posture straightened immediately. Vice President Vance, I apologize. No need, JD interrupted, raising a hand to halt the apology. His gaze shifted back to the waitress. I'd rather hear what she has to say. The manager hesitated, uncertain, but JD's steady gaze seemed to settle the matter. With a small nod, the manager stepped back, leaving the two of them once more at the center of the room's attention. The waitress folded her arms across her chest, her posture defiant. You wanted to hear what I had to say? Fine. People like you get to walk through life with everything handed to you. You sit in your offices making decisions that hurt people like me, and then you expect us to smile and pretend it's fine. Well, it's not fine. I don't owe you respect. I don't owe you anything. JD sat back slightly, his expression calm but serious. I didn't come here expecting special treatment. I came here as a customer, but I also understand that every decision I make affects real people, and I know that sometimes those decisions hurt. I don't take that lightly. Yeah? Well, try telling that to the families who can't afford groceries because of inflation, or the people who lost their jobs because of government cuts. It's easy to talk about personal responsibility when you've never had to choose between paying rent and buying food, she snapped. JD's gaze never wavered. I know what it's like to struggle, he said, his voice low but firm. I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. I've seen what it means to wonder if you'll have enough to get through the month. That's why I believe in creating opportunities for people to lift themselves up, because I know what it means to need that chance. The waitress's eyes narrowed. And what about the people who never get that chance? JD leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. That's why I do what I do. Not because I think it's easy, but because I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to succeed, even if we don't always agree on how to get there. The air between them seemed to vibrate with the weight of their words. Around them, the quiet hum of conversation remained muted, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, the waitress stepped back, her grip on the notepad tightening until her knuckles whitened. I still think you're a disgrace, she said, her voice quieter but no less sharp. But I'll get your coffee. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor as she disappeared into the kitchen. A murmur of conversation resumed, though the eyes of half the restaurant still flicked toward JD's table with lingering curiosity. JD sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly as the tension in the air began to dissipate. Yet the words exchanged between them seemed to hang in the air like echoes of a battle that had yet to reach its conclusion. He glanced toward the entrance one last time, then down at the unopened menu beside his glass of water. And as he waited, the question lingered in his mind. Was there anything he could say that would truly change her mind? Silence seemed to hang in the air long after the waitress disappeared into the kitchen. The low murmur of conversations had resumed, though every so often, curious glances flicked toward JD Vance's table. The vice president sat still, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table, eyes fixed on the window as if the city lights beyond might offer some clarity. A few minutes later, the sound of footsteps approached again. The waitress, Samantha Hale, returned with a steaming cup of black coffee. Her movements were sharp, almost mechanical, as she placed the cup down with a faint clink against the saucer. Your coffee, she said flatly, stepping back as if to leave without another word. JD glanced at the cup but didn't touch it. Instead, he looked up at her. Thank you. Samantha paused, eyes narrowing slightly. Don't thank me, she said. I'm just doing my job, whether I like it or not. JD's gaze remained steady. Then why come back? Her hands clenched at her sides. Because you wanted to hear what I had to say, she shot back. And I figured if I didn't come back, you'd leave thinking you proved some point. But you didn't. JD leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. Then prove yours. Say what's on your mind. Samantha's eyes flashed with frustration. You really want to know? She asked, voice rising just enough to catch the attention of nearby diners. Fine. People like you sit in your fancy offices, making decisions that wreck people's lives, and then you act like it's all just policy. My brother, he lost his job because of the government cuts you supported. My mom works 2 jobs and still can't afford decent health care. And I'm stuck waiting tables for people who wouldn't notice if I disappeared tomorrow. JD's expression remained calm, though something in his eyes shifted. Something softer, more introspective. I know what it's like to struggle, he said after a moment. I grew up in a family that barely made ends meet. My mom worked long hours just to keep food on the table. I've seen addiction tear families apart, and I know how easy it is to feel invisible when the world keeps moving without you. Samantha scoffed. Yeah? And look where you are now, Vice President of the United States. Must be nice to talk about hard work when you've already made it. It wasn't easy getting here, JD replied, his voice low but firm. And I didn't forget where I came from. That's why I fight for policies that give people the tools to lift themselves up, because I know what it's like to need that chance. Samantha shook her head. Tools? What tools? You talk about opportunity, but what about the people who can't even get their foot in the door? You think telling them to work harder is enough? It's not. Some people start so far behind, they never catch up, no matter how hard they try. JD exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers against the table. Around them, the restaurant had grown quieter again, as more diners tuned into the exchange. You're right, he admitted. Not everyone starts from the same place, and hard work doesn't guarantee success, but it gives you a chance, and sometimes that chance is all it takes to change everything. Samantha's eyes narrowed. Easy to say when you're the one giving the chances and deciding who gets left behind. JD's gaze didn't waver. And what would you have me do? Promise everyone a perfect life? Hand out money until the problems disappear? That might help for a moment, but it won't fix the root of the problem. Real change comes from giving people the tools to build their own future, the skills, the education, the opportunities that let them stand on their own 2 feet. Samantha opened her mouth to retort, but JD continued before she could speak. I know my choices don't make everyone happy, and I know they've caused real pain for some people. But I also know that every decision I make is with the goal of building a country where more people can succeed, where success isn't limited by where you were born or what your parents did. I don't expect you to agree with me, but I hope you can at least understand that I'm trying to do what I believe is right. For a moment, Samantha said nothing. The fire in her eyes hadn't faded, but something beneath it had shifted, just slightly. The tension in her shoulders hadn't disappeared, but her grip on the tray had loosened. I still think you're wrong, she said finally, her voice quieter but no less firm. And I still think people like you forget what it's like to be on the other side of your decisions. JD nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe there are things I'll never fully understand. But that's why conversations like this matter, because they remind me of the people behind the policies. Samantha's eyes searched his face, as if trying to decide whether his words were genuine. Around them, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting to see how the moment would end. Finally, she stepped back, her gaze still wary but no longer burning with the same intensity. Enjoy your coffee, she said simply. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the background hum of resumed conversations. JD sat still for a moment longer, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. Then, with a slow breath, he picked up the coffee cup and took a sip. The bitterness of the coffee lingered on his tongue, but the weight of the conversation lingered longer. Because some words once spoken were impossible to forget. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below.